So we saw that last season there were several teams that had fired their head coach. I think that there were 7 NFL teams that had new head coaches. I would have to look it up. I should have been prepared. I didn't know I was going to talk about it. But the Falcons, Panthers, Rams, Commanders, right?
There are 8 teams with new head
8.
coaches this year.
Okay. What's the fifth one I'm looking for that we're not about to talk about?
So I'll just list them off real
Okay,
quick. So
list
we
them off.
got Antonio Pierce with the Raiders,
Oh, okay,
Jim
that's
Harbaugh with the Chargers,
yep.
Brian Callahan with the Titans, Gerard Mayo with the Patriots, and then, like you said, the Falcons with Raheem Morris, Carolina Panthers, Dave Canales, and then Mike McDonald with the Seahawks, and then Dan Quinn with the Commanders.
Thank you, Jay. Well, there's 3 in particular that I want to point out because although we could spend all our time talking about those 8 teams, there's really no other head coaches that have achieved something other than the head coaches of Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, and Mike Vrabel. So those are really the ones I want to point out. And I kind of want to go one by one, if you don't mind, kind of see where they're going, kind of see what they've been able to accomplish in their tenure as their team that they have just head coach for, and just see who has probably the best chances to be next in line to receive a head coach job. I know in my mind I have my answer. I'm kind of curious to see how you will answer it, and let's just get started. So let's start off with Bill Belichick. Okay, this is a guy who is probably, and honestly, I don't think it's arguable, the greatest head coach of all time. We've seen what he was able to accomplish, of course, with Tom Brady, who we say is the greatest football player of all time, and it's just nothing short of greatness. I mean, the things that they were able to accomplish together, that Patriots dynasty, I mean, it lasted 20 years. 20 long years. It was very hard to watch 20 years of just dominance and greatness. And you got to leave room for other people at the end of the day. It just, they were eating all the food, they were eating all the finger food and not leaving it for anybody else. It's like you go to a Super Bowl party and you don't have any wings when the game starts because somebody had already eaten all the wings before the game started. I mean, how would you feel about that, Jackson?
Top 10 worst feeling imaginable. That or someone ate like half the nacho like before kickoff. That like those 2 things, especially nachos for me, are like you got to save some throughout the entire game, and
Exactly.
that person's getting kicked out the party ASAP.
They better be kicked out. But I have a couple things written down for Bill Belichick that I want to talk about. Of course, we know he's a 6-time Super Bowl champion and is a 3-time Coach of the Year. He won it in 2003, 2007, and 2010, which is honestly kind of weird for me to say that he never won a Coach of the Year after 2010. That's kind of strange. I feel like he would have won one, but he never did. So his tenure for the Patriots, because that's really what I want to focus on, spanned from 2000 to 2023. He was the head coach, and he was really the de facto general manager. He was in charge of everything over there in New England. Am I right about that, Jackson?
Pretty much. It was basically, yeah, he was the de facto GM. They had like a few guys, like a Nick Caserio, who's now the head GM with the Texans, who were in that front office. But basically, Bill and Robert Kraft had most of the final say on the roster.
Perfect. And I just want to point out some NFL records that I did not know this, and well, I knew a lot of them, but I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. He's got the most Super Bowl wins. He has the most Super Bowl, which he has 8, because he won 2 Super Bowls as an assistant coach with I think the Giants maybe.
I think it
Yeah,
might
the
have been when
Giants.
he
It
was
was
an
the Giants.
assistant with the Giants when they
Yeah.
had Lawrence Taylor and all those guys.
Mm-hmm. So the Giants, and then he has the most Super Bowl wins as a head coach, of course. The most Super Bowl appearances at 12. The most Super Bowl appearances as a head coach at 9. Most playoff wins, most playoff appearances, which is tied, and then he has most divisional championships as a coach, which I don't think any coach could is touching that right as of right now. There's no coach touching that.
The only
If I off the
guy,
top of my head.
the only guy I see coming close to that would be Mike Tomlin.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's fair, but like he's won what, one Super Bowl? Mike Tomlin has.
He has won 2. He won one in 2006 and then
Was he at Tampa Bay?
2010. No,
Was
that
he
was
with
both.
Tampa?
They were both with Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay. Was he not in Tampa Bay though with Tony when Tony Dungy was at Tampa Bay? They didn't win a Super Bowl then, did they?
No, Tampa
No, they
Bay
did.
won a Super Bowl when they had Gruden.
With Gruden. That's right. They won it with Gruden. That's perfect. Okay. So, as Bill Belichick's last season as head coach Patriots, which is by far his worst season, well, he went 4-13. So we saw that the Patriots had the number 3 pick in the NFL draft this past year, and it was just done. I mean, there's some times where you just wear a shirt for so long, you wear a pair of shoes for so long, and eventually they just become ragged and then out. They just become worn, and that was just the case in New England. They just kept wearing the Bill Belichick 76 shoes on for so long. And after 20 years, 23 years of Bill Belichick there, their shoes just fell apart. The sole literally fell out from the bottom of the shoe as they were walking. I mean, it was just done. It was just done. But realistically, do we see Bill Belichick in the future going for another head coaching job, or is Bill Belichick just done? Is he just done? I mean,
Uh
what more does he have to prove, Jackson? What more
no,
is there to prove?
he really doesn't have anything to prove. I think he is one of the obviously the greatest head coaches of all time. There's going to be that conversation with a Tom Landry. Want to throw him in there as well, coach that Cowboys dynasty with Roger Staubach. Um, so many other guys that you just go come to mind. I would even say Bruce Arians is getting in a little bit of that conversation as one of the best head coaches of all time. But there's not much for Bill to prove. But I will say, I think he still has that itch to coach because he was in deep conversations with the Falcons to become their head coach this past cycle before they decided to go back to Raheem Morris. So I definitely think there's an avenue for him at some point because every year there's going to be a head coach that gets fired for one reason or another, and so there will be teams that are going to want to talk to Bill Belichick.
I mean, I agree. The Commanders were, I think, the last team to find a head coach, or one of the last teams, and everyone thought, "Oh, Bill Belichick's going to the NFC. Bill Belichick's going to the NFC," and they ended up hiring Dan Quinn out of nowhere, 28-3 Dan Quinn, and who Bill Belichick ended up coming back at the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history against. I mean, and he's a lot younger than Bill Belichick. We have to put that into perspective. We can say, okay, Bill Belichick's he's won 6 times, been 9 times. I mean, we can say Bill Belichick has the best resume of any head coach out there. But we also have to put it in perspective as, okay, well, Dan Quinn's already been to a Super Bowl. He might have lost. He's a lot younger than Bill Belichick, but you obviously see his potential. You say, okay, he has the potential to go to a Super Bowl. He could win it if we have the right front office and everything. If all the cards are played right in Washington, of course. So that's just what it was at the end of the day. That's how I feel about it. Honestly, I feel like Bill Belichick's done. I mean, there's nothing more he can prove. He's just old now. And people are saying without Tom Brady, he's a fraud.
Okay. I see the argument with that. Like I could see the argument that he's done, that he'll retire, he'll go to broadcasting, and he'll just be done. The only thing is with him saying he's a fraud without Tom Brady is like, okay, it was one. Okay. Oh, right. That first Steelers Super Bowl I was thinking of was when they still had Bill Cowher as their head coach. That's the one I got mixed up with.
I thought Tampa Bay. He was with Tampa Bay.
Okay. But the thing is, it's not like he went from the greatest quarterback of all time to like Kirk Cousins or Derek Carr or Ryan Tannehill, like an average level quarterback. He went from one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time to like a gaggle of like the worst quarterbacks ever. Like Mac Jones had his flash in the pan as a rookie and then made the Pro Bowl and then is now the backup to Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. Then he had Bailey Zappi, Jared Stidham, I think, was a quarterback in that mix at some point. So Cam Newton for 3 weeks. Like, give Bill Belichick Kirk Cousins and let's see what he can do. If he still doesn't like make the playoffs or has a winning record, yeah, I think let's see what happens then. But
Well, this is interesting because like we didn't even think of this. I mean, although if he's done, he's retired, right? But no, Bill Belichick has not officially retired yet. It hasn't been set in stone. Obviously, people are still. I mean, I think it's just a waiting game. We have more head coaches to talk about it, but Bill Belichick obviously has the most on his resume, and he might be done. He might not, because although he has nothing to prove, right? But although I feel like he has nothing to prove, people still feel that way because we just talked about people think he's a fraud. So if Bill Belichick lets that get to his ego or get to his pride, he's going to be like, okay, am I really a fraud? Let's see what I can do with Jaden Daniels, for example. Someone like just a rookie, like a good rookie quarterback. I don't think Dan Quinn's going to be one and done in Washington, but that was just maybe he goes to Chicago. How much longer is Matt Eberflus going to be there? Because this is really, in my opinion, Matt Eberflus is that's it. I mean, he does good here, he stays. He does bad, he's gone.
yeah, I pretty much nail on the head. Yeah, have at the very least a winning record. Have to go 9-8 this year to keep his job.
Got a
Oh my!
25-year-old girlfriend. He's trying to do some damage in the NFL.
Oh my
That's funny.
god!
Okay, well, enough about Bill Belichick. I don't want to spend the whole time talking about him because I want to talk about Pete Carroll too. I'm going to talk about Pete Carroll, Mike Vrabel. I just went from the highest resume to the lowest just to see how it would turn out because Mike Vrabel is actually an interesting one. So let's go to Pete Carroll first. We obviously know he's beaten Belichick before. It's a one-time Super Bowl win. That was against the Denver Broncos. I'm sorry, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, that was against the Broncos. He
Yeah.
lost against Belichick because they didn't run it on the 2-yard line. Well, what's interesting, although he's never won a Coach of the Year, he's had one Super Bowl. Pete Carroll is one of the few head coaches who have won a national championship and a Super Bowl. So he's got 2 national championships on his belt in college, and his tenure for the Seahawks went from 2010 to 2023. So although he didn't spend a lot of time in the NFL like Belichick, Bill Belichick's career was exclusively in the NFL. Pete Carroll has accolades outside of it to prove that, hey, I'm a good head coach with high school recruits and college drafted players. So it's interesting to see how he can keep progressing players up and up and up to the next levels. The last season, which is actually the best season of the 3 teams for the Seahawks last year, was 9-8, and they were on the verge of making the playoffs. They just thought, hey, this tenure for Pete Carroll's over. I mean, honestly, Pete Carroll is in the front office of Seattle now. So I honestly, although Bill Belichick doesn't have a job right now, other than his 25-year-old girlfriend, Pete Carroll is accepted a job as in the front office of Seattle this next coming year. Is that something that could mess up his chances of having another head coach position, or do you just say he sticks in the front office of Seattle, stays where he's been all these years, and no beef or tough love there?
You know, the only thing I could see it potentially doing is like see, depending, I don't know the exact ins and outs of it, but I know for certain circumstances, he's you have to get permission to interview some people. Like I know for coordinators, I think the Commanders had to get permission from the Lions to interview their offensive coordinator for the head coaching job. So I'm not sure how exactly that would work with Pete, but you know he's in his mid 70s at this point, Pete Carroll, and not to say that he can't do the job, but I think he's going to just keep trying to move up into the Seattle's front office, be an advisor, helping player development. Um, Not necessarily be a scout, but help the scouts with trying to draft and get players. So I think it's good for him to take this sort of step back, and I think he's done. I think he has firmly cemented himself as a Seattle Seahawks legend, easily the best coach in franchise history, and would have had 2 Super Bowls if he and an offensive coordinator would have had 2 brain cells and didn't share just one. So I think he's done.
I agree. I mean, I think Pete Carroll's older than Bill Belichick. Is he?
I don't know. Let me double check this. Hold on. Jackson research time. Let's see.
You said mid 70s. Belichick 72.
Pete Carroll's 72.
Okay, well they're the same.
He'll be 73 this September.
Oh, okay. Well then Belichick was born in 52. Pete Carroll was born in 51. So Pete Carroll has a yeah. See,
Okay.
Pete Carroll's the oldest coach in the league. Pete Carroll can bench press 215, squat 380. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. I don't know if that's true, but if Pete Carroll can do that at 72, I need what he's taking. But obviously, we've seen somebody like Pete Carroll produce someone like Russell Wilson, who hasn't had the greatest time in the past year. I mean, I think player development would be right up his alley if he were to go into something like that in the Seahawks. I mean, we've already said he's done. There's just not much to say about Pete Carroll anymore. But this last coach is very interesting because Mike Vrabel is young coach. He's up and coming. He was a player and a very good one at that, because as a player, he's won 3 Super Bowls with I think all with the Patriots.
Yes,
he was a Patriots linebacker. And then in 2007, he won a first team All-Pro. So we know that in 2007, Mike Vrabel was the best linebacker, at least probably in the league, but at least in his conference. They do it per conference, right? All-Pro?
All pro teams are total NFL.
Okay, it's total NFL. Okay, well then he probably was the best linebacker in the league then at the end 2007. But as a coach, there's not much to his resume, as he was head coach of the Titans from 2018 to 2023. He won Coach of the Year in 2021. And what's interesting is, although he didn't have a Bill Belichick season, the Titans only won 6 games, 11 losses, and were last in the AFC South. So I honestly did not see this coming. I don't know if you did, but I don't think Mike Vrabel should have left Tennessee that year. I'm curious to see what you think, but I didn't think it was in for Vrabel. To see him get fired was just surprising, incredibly surprising.
You know, I think it was time for a fresh voice in that Titans locker room and to turn the page, because you knew you weren't going to re-sign Derrick Henry. You already traded away AJ Brown essentially for DeAndre Hopkins at that point. I think it was just time for a new voice. And yes, they got him. He got him to an AFC Championship game with Ryan Tannehill. You now have Will Levis as your quarterback instead of Ryan Tannehill. So I think it was just time to get a new and more offensively focused head coach. Not to say that the Titans' offenses were bad under Vrabel, they just could have been better for the most part. I mean, if Derrick Henry couldn't run the ball, the Titans offense was screwed most weeks. So
I mean,
I yeah, so I think he's in an interesting situation. I not totally surprised he got fired from Tennessee, but I could see him working out somewhere else where the offense is a little bit more established and he can raise up a defense that needs some help.
well, I want to pick out a comment that I put up on the screen earlier because it's interesting. And Jack has pointed out that he thinks that he's going to get the Ohio State job, which, if that is true, Mike Vrabel is in Cleveland as of right now, so he did get his new job. He's in Cleveland as of right now, and if what you're saying is true, where he needs to go somewhere where it is offensively better than Tennessee, maybe going to college isn't the worst idea because Ohio State has been proven to be one of the more dominant offenses in college football. Why not go to something like that?
Yeah, a lot of guys can rehabilitate their value in the college ranks. It's not necessarily a proven track record. Guys can coach in college and move to the NFL. The two biggest were Jim Harbaugh and Pete Carroll from Stanford and USC. So I think if he can kind of turn around his resume, keep Ohio State to the excellence they have, if not even further, I could see him if he does take that job in 3 or 4 years coming back to the NFL.
Well, I mean, we can even take somebody like Matt Rule, for example. We have seen it's Matt Rule, I think. Yeah, we have seen Nebraska's dominance in the '90s in for college football. Nebraska is not a small name in the college football, especially in the '90s. I mean, if you watched, I obviously wasn't alive, but if you know
Mhm.
college football history, you know that Nebraska was one of the top teams. Well, Matt Rule is trying to get Nebraska back on top. He's trying to get the Cornhusker name back in people's mouths, and he's doing some very good recruiting in Nebraska. And although we saw, I mean, he was on with the Panthers, I remember, and it was bad, it was horrible years, but I mean, Matt Rule didn't get the number one overall pick, so he kind of left before then. He didn't really do a good of his job as they wanted him to. Went to college, and I think he's doing pretty well for himself in Nebraska. I'd have to look at Nebraska's records over the past years, but I know recruiting wise, Nebraska got the number one quarterback in the nation, recruiting wise. So, I mean, maybe if Vrabel goes to Ohio State, people are like, okay, this is NFL head coach. We want to play for him. I feel like that was the same with Matt Rule. I mean, how else does Nebraska get the number one quarterback in the nation?
Right.
Other
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I'm finished. That's what I was gonna say. Other than just Matt Rule's name, you know.
Yeah, I was looking up on Nebraska's website. They went 5-7 this year in 2023. So this past season. So
What was the year
they did have
before
a
it?
couple of big wins. So yeah, so yes, and he also had Nebraska go undefeated in the month of October for the first time since 2001.
Okay, that's pretty good. I mean, five. I don't know how well they were the previous year, but 5 wins. That's how much State got this past year. So I'm not gonna say Nebraska was bad because if I say Nebraska's bad, then I'm calling my own college bad. So I can't do that.